On the afternoon of July the 14th this year, Councillor Edward Bolton, aged 50, one of Fulchester's leading public figures, was in his office at number 106 Market Street. During the afternoon, he had occasion to call in his secretary, a Miss Gillian Hayes, aged 18, from the outer office to take down some dictation. What took place whilst Miss Hayes was in the councillor's office not only shocked his colleagues, but today is the subject of the case of the Queen versus Bolton in the Crown Court.
And the prosecution alleges, members of the jury, that the defendant, after blowing or breathing on Miss Hayes's neck, said, "I bet that tickled. Never mind, I'll scratch your back for you." She will say that he put his hand down her back, attempting to unfasten her brassiere, and then began to fondle her right breast, so that she was obliged to wriddle to one side in order to escape his attentions. So much, members of the jury, for the allegations which form the basis of this charge. However, Miss Hayes will also say that it was but a culmination of a series of incidents which, again, to use her own words, made my life a misery. As for corroborative evidence, there is an office colleague of Miss Hayes, a Miss Barbara Foster, who will say that as she entered the office, she in fact saw her friend trying to escape the defendant's attentions. She will further say that he had his hand inside Miss Hayes' blouse and that her friend was extremely distressed. Miss Foster was in fact so incensed by this that she remonstrated with the defendant, calling him a dirty pig. And she further alleges that the defendant replied, "She was enjoying it until you came in, you silly bitch." A complaint was subsequently made to the police, and when charged, the defendant replied, "This is ridiculous. A man of my position." A man of my position. Now, you must all be aware, members of the jury, just who the defendant is. He is extremely well known in the locality. He has been in local politics and taken a leading part in the social, official, political life of the area for something like 25 years. Now, plainly, an accusation of this nature is of extreme importance to a man like this. Not only is the man on trial, but his immense public reputation as well. But I must remind you, members of the jury, as I'm sure His Honour will do at a later stage, that you must not allow the defendant's position to bedazzle you. For two reasons. One, that your sole interest is, of course, the facts. And two, that a public reputation not only commands respect, but should also presume certain standards. Now, with Your Honour's leave, I would like to call my first witness for the prosecution, Mrs. Veronica Hayes.
But that lady is not the complainant, Miss Tate. It's the usual practice to call the complainant first in these cases.
I appreciate that, Your Honour, but there are rather special circumstances which, in my respectful submission, I feel justify the course I am taking.
Very well. I rely upon you, Miss Tate.
What is your religion, please?
CV.
You take the book in your right hand and swear the oath.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
What is your full name?
Veronica Hayes.
And where do you live, Mrs. Hayes?
18 Shakespeare Avenue, Fulchester.
Are you the mother of Gillian Hayes, the complainant in this case?
Yes, I am.
Do you remember the afternoon of July the 14th this year?
Oh, yes. That was the afternoon it all happened.
Now, do you remember it?
Very well.
What were you doing?
Well, I was at home making the tea. I bought a bit of fresh salmon for a treat, you know. Well, it's so expensive.
Now,
You can only get it
what
once a year.
happened when you were making the tea, Mrs. Hayes?
Well, I put the salmon in a pan with a bit of water, because it doesn't need a lot of cooking,
Just
you
the
know.
facts of the matter in hand, please, Mrs. Hayes. Embellishments are not only of no consequence, they waste valuable time.
Sorry.
What happened?
Oh, well, Jill suddenly walked in.
Where from?
Well, from work.
Was this her usual time for coming home from work?
No, it was only 4:30. She doesn't usually get home till nearly 6. Later, if she doesn't get a lift from Mr. Sharp next door.
And what was her demeanour?
Pardon?
Was she happy, sad? What mood was she in?
Well, I thought she must be ill at first, but she said she wasn't.
So there was something not quite normal about her then, was there?
I didn't notice anything at first. It was just her being so early.
When did you notice something?
When she suddenly burst out crying. She hung up her coat and she'd gone into the front room, and then I heard her crying.
And what did you do?
Went to see what was wrong, forgetting all about me salmon.
What was wrong, Mrs. Hayes?
Well, couldn't get a word out of her for love nor money, not at first. But eventually she said, "Mr. Bolton's been meddling with me."
Your daughter then made a complaint to you, did she?
I'll say she did, after a lot of persuasion.
And what did you do as a consequence of what she told you?
Well, took her down to the police station, didn't I? Very sharpish.
Thank you, Mrs. Hayes.
Fresh salmon was burnt to a frazzle, I might tell you, not to mention a perfectly good pan.
What were the special circumstances for calling this witness first, Miss Tate?
I'm sorry, Your Honour. She has a rather important hospital appointment to keep. Isn't that so, Mrs. Hayes?
That's right. I'm not well at all. And this business hasn't helped much, I might tell you.
Mr. Dealey.
How old is your daughter, Mrs. Hayes?
Just gone 18.
She lively, quiet, reserved?
Normal?
So she's not rather quiet and reserved, then?
Well, she doesn't go out all that much. Not like me.
Pardon? I didn't quite catch what you just said.
I said Jill doesn't go out much like me. I like a bit of life. Health permitting, of course.
Health permitting, of course.
Well, you only live once, don't you?
Indeed we do, Mrs. Hayes. Indeed we do. Tell me, does your husband live with you?
We're parted.
You're parted, I see.
We never got on. His ideas weren't my ideas. He's a home bird.
Like your daughter, maybe.
Well, I suppose you could say that.
Tell me, Mrs. Hayes, has your daughter got a boyfriend?
No, not that I know of.
Not even a casual one?
No, I keep telling her it's time she had, but she never takes any notice. She's a big reader.
A big reader. Had your daughter ever made any previous complaint against Councillor Bolton?
Hardly mentioned him. Still, she wouldn't. She's not very forthcoming about anything.
In fact, she wasn't very forthcoming about this particular complaint, was she, Mrs. Hayes? In fact, she needed a lot of persuasion before she'd tell you anything about it, I think you said.
That's right. But I dragged it out of her eventually.
You dragged it out of her eventually. Do you know Councillor Bolton?
Only by name. Well, I've seen his picture in the paper often enough. Well, everybody does, don't they?
Isn't it true that last year you had a dispute with your landlord, the local council?
Well, it wasn't exactly a dispute. It was more of a misunderstanding.
They suggested that you'd taken in a lodger, which was contrary to their policy.
Well, he wasn't a lodger. He was a friend. A guest.
Nevertheless, you were ordered to ask him to leave.
That's right.
By the Housing Committee,
Yes.
of which Councillor Bolton was chairman.
I never dealt with him, though.
He was chairman.
I believe he was.
You were very quick to take your daughter to the police station, weren't you, Mrs. Hayes? Sharpish, I think was your word.
Well, if you'd have seen the state she was in, you'd have taken her to the police. Nobody meddles with my daughter, and definitely not dirty old men, that's for sure.
That's all, Mrs. Hayes, thank you.
You may stand down, Mrs. Hayes.
Call Barbara Foster.
What is your religion, please?
The Church of England.
Take the book in your right hand and swear the oath.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
So,
What is your full name?
Barbara Foster,
And where do you live?
at 20 Belfield Street, Fulchester.
What were you doing on the afternoon of July the 14th, Miss Foster?
Typing out a list of local holiday dates.
Where?
At work.
Where is work?
Fulchester Trades and Labour Council offices.
Perhaps it might be as well to establish the precise nature of the defendant's employment at this stage, Your Honour.
Yeah.
The defendant is also employed there, isn't he?
Yeah, he's secretary, a boss.
Who else works there?
Well, me and Gillian Hayes did. We've been sacked.
Gillian Hayes, the complainant in this case.
The who?
The girl against whom the assault was committed.
It's an alleged assault, Your Honour.
The alleged assault, if that will make my friend feel better. Well, Miss Hayes? Miss Foster?
I've forgotten what you asked me.
Is Gillian Hayes, your office colleague, the girl who was allegedly assaulted?
She was definitely assaulted.
Now, did you and Miss Hayes each do a similar job?
Oh, Jill was his secretary. I was just the office dog's body. She's better at shorthand than me, you see.
Going back to the afternoon of July the 14th, where were you?
In the outer office.
And Miss Hayes?
In his office.
Was Mr. Bolton in there with her?
Well, of course he was.
Right. So you were in the outer office, and Mr. Bolton and Miss Hayes were in Mr. Bolton's office?
Yeah, that's right.
Are the two offices side by side?
Oh, yeah, bang next door.
Well, what happened then?
Well, I finished typing out a list of holidays, and I went into his office to give it to him.
And what did you see when you got into the defendant's office?
I saw him standing behind Jill with his hand down the back of her blouse.
Is this the blouse that Miss Hayes was wearing?
Well, if it's not, it's one dead like it.
I'd like this entered as an exhibit, Your Honour. In fact, it's my only exhibit. About the blouse, Miss Foster. It's a very loose-fitting one, isn't it?
Loose? It's like a tent. You couldn't tell what anybody was, well, like under it, could you?
The neck is loose as well.
Yeah, like a tent.
So it wouldn't be difficult for anyone to slip their hand down the back of it.
Oh, easy as pie.
Which is what you say the defendant was doing when you went in.
Really, Your Honour, I don't
Definitely
think my
he was.
learned friend should lead her witness quite like that.
Indeed, Mr. Dealey, she should not.
I apologise, Your Honour. Did the defendant see you come into the office? I mean, immediately.
I don't know.
Did he not say or do anything?
No, but Jill did. She sort of ducked her head down and slid off her chair.
Onto the floor?
Well, no, she was sort of crouched down like, and then she stood up.
What was her demeanour?
Pardon?
What was Miss Hayes' attitude, her condition?
She was red in the face.
Angry?
Or more upset. Yeah, definitely upset.
Why do you say definitely, Miss Foster?
Well, Jill wouldn't exactly be enjoying it. Not that, being meddled with.
You're referring to the defendant having his hand down her blouse.
And the rest.
The rest?
Yeah, do you...
Really, Your Honour, whatever it is Miss Foster's about to tell us can surely only be hearsay or even speculation.
Yes, be careful, Miss Tate. I can see the temptation, but I can't help feeling that Mr. Dealey may be right.
Did Miss Hayes say anything to you at this stage, in the office?
No, she just pelted out.
Did Mr. Bolton say anything?
I'll say he did.
What did he say?
He said that she was enjoying it till I'd come in, and then he called me a silly bitch.
Did you say anything to that?
Yeah, I called him a dirty pig.
Then what happened?
Well, I put the holiday list on his desk and walked out myself.
And where was Miss Hayes at this time?
Well, she was in the outer office.
And
putting her coat on.
what was her demeanour?
Well, she turned white, like she were ill.
How well do you know Miss Hayes?
Well enough.
Well enough to say that she was extremely distressed when she left the office.
Well, what do you expect when she'd just had her worst fears confirmed?
Her worst fears? What worst fears would those be, Miss Foster?
Well, Jill always thought men were dirty pigs, and now she knows they are.
Thank you, Miss Foster.